Thanks a lot for having me. Kieran, thanks for very warm words about us. A bit about us. We built various custom media trading platforms for many years, for many clients, and have an interesting inside look from technology outwards on what is happening in the industry, how it works, and how it sometimes doesn't work. The topic which we talk to our clients more often than we wanted is, well, the clients want many things at the same time. And very often we come back and say, like, look, you can't have everything. What's your real goal? So a campaign very typically want to have all of this and more. And you work very hard. You deliver 1,000 conversions. And they say, yeah, terrific, but click rate wasn't good enough. And you say, well, OK, fine. Here is terrific click rate. And say, well, I'm not sure the quality of the traffic was good, which is a polite way of saying that maybe some of those clicks were not real ones. And at the end of the day, when you deliver everything, they say, well, why your services are so expensive, which is a polite way of saying that computational efficiency wasn't there. So for a while, we thought that it's all about clients just being human beings, just want everything, not terribly rational, and so on. But as we spend more time, we realize there is some underlying reason for those conflicts, and there is actually technology challenges in how those can be addressed. One thing you realize is that on the demand side, on every single campaign, or at least most of the campaigns, there are at least 3 parties involved. There is the advertiser, there is agency, and there is DSP. There could be more parties, but those 3 are almost always present. And out of those things which I mentioned, different parties want different things. Advertiser wants quality, wants some KPIs, click conversions. Agency, very, very sensitive about margin on their media buy. And DSP is measuring the computation efficiency. So why they're doing this, or maybe to simplify, advertiser wants best impression, agency wants cheapest, and the DSP wants as many bits per server as they can get away with. Now, the reason for this is not so much technology. The reason for this is because the underlying business model behind all this is somewhat broken. Now, advertiser wants best impression, and that makes total sense. Still, they go on and they contract agency to deliver impressions at $3 per 1,000. They don't really say, agency, please give me only the best. They say, any impression, no matter what, as long as it passes targeting, it's $3. So at that moment, at least immediate interest for the agency is to get as cheap impressions as possible, because the difference, at least some agencies, at least in some cases, the difference between $3 CPM and whatever they buy media at goes as margin for the agency. Now, agency kind of goes to DSP and say, look, I'm paying you 10% of media cost, which again is misaligned with the underlying immediate reason to get cheapest possible media buy. Now, the DSP doesn't really, the cheaper the media cost, the less money DSP gets. So the DSP doesn't really struggle, doesn't put too much resources in making it as cheap as possible. They just do some decent job. And in the middle of that, there is a technology owner, could be DSP, could be somebody else, who needs to balance all those competing and contradictory requirements. So at the end of the day, if you build the technology, you need to buy an impression, and this impression will have some cost and might or might not generate to a click. So at the end of the day, you play a sheriff and try to balance those interests of different parties which are all talking to each other during media trading. And these days, this job of balancing their interests is really difficult, and it's not so much a technology problem. The problem is that the parties are don't trust each other too much. And this needs to stop. At the end of the day, the technology can do only that much. You need some sort of policing, you need some sort of rule of law, you need some way of making it. Oh, by the way, technology speak for this is limited transparency, so that transparency needs to be better. After all that fixed, and I believe it will be fixed one way or another, but after everything is transparent, everything is clear, the technological problem is still there, because at the end of the day, most of today's algorithms can go and deliver on one goal. And this could be multiple different goals. You can go and maximize margin. You can go and maximize number of clicks. But at the end of the day, it's this single goal, and the algorithm just goes and does it. However, in this future fully transparent world, we can see that what's required is not a single goal, but a balance. And today, you can get away with this single-minded algorithms because you just do whatever you feel is right, and you get away with it because there is no transparency. But once the transparency is there, it's important that you explain why you've done this, what else was possible, and so on. So I'm trying to explain how that future thing actually works. And by the way, just to reemphasize the fact, those goals are complicated and competing and difficult. Rather than talking in general terms, let's take a specific example of an agency and look at how a very transparent agency might formulate their goals. So they say, I must spend the budget, and then I must hit the advertiser KPIs. And if I can do both, then actually I can take as much money as I can from the media buy, which is goal number 3, and show their margin. So that's relatively transparent. I can see agency coming and defending it in front of an advertiser as a fair set of objectives. How should it play together? Now, the first thing, you must understand what is possible. Not what you achieved as a result of running this campaign, but what was possible before you even started. So let's take, again, specific example. We spent a single day trading media in Berlin and on edX. So all possible outcomes of this trading are captured with this reachable zone, this thing in blue. For example, I could have just spent the entire day doing absolutely nothing, in which case I'll get 0 media cost, I get 0 impressions, so I'll be here. That's definitely possible. Alternative, I can buy $10 CPM and buy everything which was available on this day in Berlin, which will be this point on this reachable zone. And for the record, for this particular day, 96 million impressions, which is quite a lot for Berlin. You would have spent that much money and generate about 60,000 clicks. Now, everything over here is possible. And if, for example, you try to get $200-odd to get 60 million odd impressions, that's not possible. That's outside of reachable zone. So a natural DSP strategy will be, OK, I go in and get cheapest 30 million impressions for this day in Berlin. Yes, that's this point. And you can see I need to spend about $25,000. And we'll be paying about 83 cents CPM. Now, the interesting thing about the reachable zone is that it's a convex bounded body. At least it's convex on AdX, because they run the true second price auction. If it's not true second price, then this thing needs to be modified. And the other important, very important thing for this multiple goals is that it's actually multidimensional. Now, here I just draw a projection onto media cost and impressions. But if you care about clicks, that will be 3-dimensional. If you care, for example, about clicks and unique users, that's a 4-dimensional body of which I'm showing you at 2-dimensional projections. To emphasize the point, let me rotate this body around media cost axis, which hopefully might even work. And what you see is that now I'm basically turning it onto me, and I'm seeing clicks. So that's the same reachable zone, but I'm now looking at a different view. And on that view, what I see now is that my buy all Berlin strategy is still up here. It's still my 60,000 clicks. I now know it's 60,000 because that's the value along this axis. And I also realize now that my cheapest 30 million impressions actually now generate about 13,000 clicks. And for that money, I could have bought way more clicks. I could have been here, click-wise. But then it would mean that I would get less impressions. So essentially, this shape, which, by the way, can be properly measured without spending 274,000. So you go, you run a very small sample campaign, you get all this, and then you understand what's possible. Now, how do you use it? Well, what you can do now, you can formulate two things. You can formulate the restrictions. Those are hard restrictions, and the idea is that you must absolutely stop the campaign unless those restrictions are met. Very typically, it's a budget restriction that there is no way on earth this campaign can stop with more than 30 million impressions. Often it's CPM restrictions. On average, the CPM should be less than $3. Sometimes there's margin restrictions and sometimes more. And then you define not a single goal, but a sequence of prioritized goals. So in the example we just discussed, first goal is your impressions, get 30 million impressions. And if you can't get 30 million impressions, don't bother with this, don't bother with that. Just spend all your resources to get this goal. If this goal can be reached, then you're allowed to consider this one, and this one will be hitting some KPIs on the advertiser side. Go do it, and only after that is reached, you can go and start further tinkering with the margin. So the combination of restrictions and the sequence of goals, we call them strategy cards. And what we discover is that even relatively small agencies generate dozens and dozens of those. And they have hilarious discussions between their sales team and operations team about which exact cards to assign to exact campaign. So for example, do you want to spend the budget even without meeting advertiser KPI, yes or no? Terrific discussion, and that's how it should happen. That's actually, they need to make campaign-by-campaign choice. Nothing to do with technology, everything to do with running transparent business. Now, how does it look with reachability zone? So I said, look, two restrictions, less than 40 million impressions, 48 million impressions, and cheaper than 2.85 CPM on average. That means that out of this big cigar shape, which was all what was possible in Berlin, I'm now only allowing myself to consider this piece because I want to have less than 48 million and I want to have cheaper than this 2.85 media CPM. Now, what about the sequence of goals? OK, so my second goal was to reach a particular CTR, and my last goal was to minimize media cost. So you basically cut this shape with a horizontal plane, kill everything up because you don't want it, and then focus on this area, which is basically where the 48 million impressions could be delivered. So everywhere on this plot, you get exactly 48 million impressions. Now, this part is not allowed because of the CPM restriction. So remember that CPM restriction, which looks like a line on one view. Now on the projection, it basically looks like a vertical line, and it cuts out this. So everywhere in this blue shape, the first goal is reached. What about the second one? OK, that means actually because you can reach the first, you can go and proceed with the second. The second goal says that CTR should be this 0.062%. That's this line. So everywhere between here and here, your second goal is reached. You have an entire line to yourself. And now agencies are allowed to go and proceed with their third goal, which is basically to get onto this at the cheapest possible media, which will end up being 65, or actually I have a better slide. Yeah, so that's how it looks like overall. The agency hit the restriction on media cost, hit the restriction on CTR, managed to deliver all this at 65.8, which in this particular example means taking 62% of margin, and it's fine, it's transparent. We explain why it's 62% and not some other number, and generated about that many clicks. That's the sort of technology which enable you to run a proper, fully transparent media buy, explaining to all parties involved why you've done this and why it's fair. Now, to sum it up, there are conflicts. Though conflicts are right now being gamed, and you just get away with what makes sense for you and ignore some other parties. And this needs to be fixed. And at least the technology to find a fair balance is out there working, and I hope will be used more widely. Thank you very much for your time.